I never thought my parents would look me in the eye, in the very office where I had spent countless nights keeping their dream alive, and tell me I was no longer a good investment. But that's exactly what happened. I had worked for my family's business for almost a decade. We weren't some small mom-and-pop shop. My parents had built a mid-sized company that was respected in our community. By the time I graduated college, I was already running operations, handling clients, and basically holding things together while my dad chased expansion plans and my mom obsessed over cutting costs. I poured everything into that place. Late nights, missed holidays, and more stress than any 20-something should ever carry. I thought I was securing my future, that one day I'd step into leadership and keep the family legacy alive. But apparently, loyalty doesn't matter when the numbers don't add up. One Friday afternoon, they called me into the conference room. My mom sat there with spreadsheets spread out like a courtroom exhibit, while my dad leaned back with his arms crossed. They told me the company was struggling, expenses were too high, and tough decisions had to be made. I was their tough decision. They fired me, not because I was incompetent, not because I did anything wrong, but because I was their highest salary outside of executives, and they thought cutting me would help the bottom line. I remember asking, "So you're letting me go instead of Daniel?" Daniel, my younger brother, who had been coasting through life working part-time in the same business, showing up late, leaving early, and contributing next to nothing. My mom didn't even blink. She said, "Daniel may not be as experienced as you, but he's family too, and he costs less. We need to be practical." That was the moment something inside me broke. They didn't just fire me. They chose my lazy brother over me. They reduced everything I had sacrificed to a line item on a spreadsheet. And the worst part? They expected me to understand, to quietly pack my things, and to still come home for Sunday dinners like nothing happened. I walked out of that building that day with nothing but a cardboard box of my belongings, a shattered sense of loyalty, and a promise to myself. I would never, ever let them have that kind of power over me again. Of course, I had no idea that years later, I'd be sitting on the other side of the table, this time with the power to decide whether their company lived or died. And when that moment finally came, I had to ask myself the question I'm asking all of you now. Would I be the asshole for letting my parents' business collapse after everything they did to me? Walking out of that office felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. For years, my entire identity had been tied to the family business. I was the dependable one, the fixer, the person clients called when my dad overpromised and my brother dropped the ball. Suddenly, I wasn't just unemployed. I was unwanted by the very people I thought I was sacrificing for. The first few weeks were brutal. I didn't have savings because I had always reinvested into the company, trusting that my parents would take care of me in the long run. Rookie mistake. Rent was due. Bills piled up. I had to take whatever work I could find just to stay afloat. For a while, that meant freelancing, helping small businesses with operations, logistics, and client management. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was inconsistent, but at least it kept me busy enough not to spiral completely. I remember the first holiday season after being fired. My mom texted me about Christmas dinner like nothing had happened. I ignored it. The thought of sitting at the same table with my brother, hearing him brag about how stressful his part-time workload was, made my blood boil. The truth is, the betrayal hurt more than the job loss itself. I could have forgiven being laid off if it were purely financial. But the fact that they kept Daniel, who contributed nothing, proved that it wasn't just about money. It was about favoritism, about them never seeing me for the value I truly brought. That anger, though, became fuel. One night, while scrolling through job postings, I noticed a mid-sized competitor of my parents' company looking for a consultant. They were struggling with scaling their operations, something I knew inside out. I hesitated at first. Was it petty to join the competition? Was I lowering myself to revenge? But then I thought, why not? I have skills. I need stability. And if I succeed, it proves my parents were wrong about me. So I applied. What started as a consulting contract turned into something much bigger. The CEO noticed how quickly I streamlined things, cut waste, improved client satisfaction, boosted employee morale. Within 6 months, I wasn't just a consultant. I was offered a full-time position as head of operations. For the first time in my life, I was being rewarded for my actual contributions, not dismissed as too expensive. Meanwhile, I still heard bits and pieces about the family business. My parents weren't exactly subtle. They'd brag on social media about how Daniel was finding his leadership style. Translation: he was playing boss while everyone else did the work. Behind closed doors, though, whispers started reaching me through old contacts. Contracts falling through, employees quitting, debt piling up. It was surreal. On one hand, I felt vindicated. This was exactly what I warned them about. Daniel couldn't handle responsibility, and cutting costs by axing me was short-sighted. On the other hand, part of me still ached. This was my family, my blood. Watching them dig their own grave felt like watching someone you love drink poison, one sip at a time. But I kept building my own path. I worked insane hours, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Every success was proof that I wasn't just some disposable expense. By the end of my second year, the competitors' revenue had doubled. Clients they had once lost to my parents were now flocking back. Largely because I knew exactly how my family's business operated and where their weak spots were. I wasn't trying to sabotage them. I was just doing my job. But the irony wasn't lost on me. Every step I took forward seemed to push them further into decline. And then came the day that changed everything. One morning, I walked into the office and was told we were in talks to acquire another company. The name popped up on the screen, and my heart stopped. It was my parents' company. I can still remember the exact moment I saw their company's name on that acquisition list. My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster, but my pulse shot through the roof at the same time. There it was, in bold letters. The very business I had given my 20s to. The one that cast me aside like trash. The one my parents swore would never need me. And now, they were drowning, desperate for a buyout. I sat there in the conference room, surrounded by executives tossing around numbers, acting like this was just another transaction. For them, it was just business. But for me, this was personal. My bloodline was tied to that company. My childhood was built in its offices. My identity had been shattered in that same boardroom. And now I had the chance to watch it collapse or decide its fate myself. I didn't say anything during that first meeting. I just sat there, silently absorbing every word while my mind replayed that day they fired me. My mom's cold eyes over her spreadsheets. My dad's silence as he let her do the dirty work. My brother's smug grin when I walked out with my box of things. The irony was suffocating. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with an email from an old coworker who still kept me in the loop. Apparently, my parents had been scrambling for months, taking out loans, slashing staff, begging for extensions from suppliers. They had reached the point of no return. The only thing keeping the lights on was the hope that someone bigger would swoop in and rescue them. And that someone was now me. I won't lie, part of me felt guilty. This was my family. The people who raised me, clothed me, gave me opportunities. But the louder voice in my head kept repeating. They're also the people who betrayed you. They didn't just fire you, they humiliated you. They chose Daniel over you. They told you you weren't worth keeping. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a villain plotting revenge. I saw someone who had finally climbed out of the hole they dug for me, only to find them at the bottom, begging for a rope. And that's what made it complicated. The next week, the CEO asked me to prepare a report. He knew my background, knew I had insight into how the company worked. He wanted me to evaluate the acquisition, strengths, weaknesses, risks. In other words, he wanted me to dissect my parents' life's work and put a price tag on its carcass. I hesitated before opening the files. Felt wrong, invasive, almost cruel. But then again, hadn't they done the same to me? Reduced me to a line item, a cost to be cut? I dug in. What I found was worse than I expected. Mismanaged contracts, inflated vendor costs, outdated systems, and of course, Daniel drawing a salary that didn't match his output. I tried to stay objective, but with every red flag I highlighted, I couldn't ignore the small flicker of satisfaction inside me. It was like the universe had handed me proof of everything I had said years ago. that firing me was a catastrophic mistake. At the end of the report, I wrote my conclusion plainly. Acquisition viable, but only if purchased at significant discount. Current leadership has failed. Leadership, that meant my parents. I stared at those words for a long time before hitting send. I wasn't just recommending a business move. I was signing the death warrant of my parents' legacy. And deep down, I knew they'd eventually find out who was behind it. The day of the meeting felt unreal. Our legal team had set up a preliminary discussion with the current owners of the company. My parents. I hadn't spoken to them in over 3 years. No phone calls, no holidays, nothing beyond the occasional text from my mom that I never responded to. And now, instead of sitting across from them at a dinner table, I was about to face them across a boardroom table. When I walked in, they were already there. My dad looked older, shoulders slumped, the kind of man who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. My mom, on the other hand, still had that sharp, calculating stare, though the exhaustion around her eyes gave her away. And then there was Daniel, lounging in his chair with the same smug expression he'd worn the day I was fired, except now it looked forced, like even he knew he was out of his depth. The moment my mom saw me, her face froze. My dad blinked in surprise. Daniel muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I sat down, calm and professional, pretending my heart wasn't hammering in my chest. The lead attorney introduced everyone and began outlining the potential terms of acquisition. I didn't say much at first. I let them sweat, let them realize exactly who they were dealing with. Finally, my mom leaned forward and said, "So, you're with them now?" Her tone dripped with disdain, like I had betrayed the family by daring to build a life outside of their company. I met her gaze and replied evenly, "I'm head of operations. I was asked to evaluate your company. That's why I'm here." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. My dad cleared his throat. "Son, this doesn't have to be adversarial. We're just looking for a fair deal." Fair deal. I almost laughed. Was it fair when they fired me to save a few bucks? Was it fair when they kept Daniel, knowing he wasn't capable of pulling his own weight? Instead, I said, "I've already submitted my report. The numbers speak for themselves." Daniel scoffed. "Oh, give me a break. You've always thought you were smarter than everyone. You think just because you've been playing corporate hotshot for a few years that you can judge us?" I turned to him slowly. "Daniel, I don't need to think I can judge. The contracts, the debts, the turnover, they already did the judging. I'm just putting it on paper." My mom's jaw tightened. My dad shifted uncomfortably. For once, Daniel had no comeback. What struck me most was how small they looked. These were the people I once viewed as powerful, larger than life, the foundation of everything I worked for. Now they looked desperate, cornered, clinging to whatever scraps of control they had left. The meeting wrapped up with talk of timelines and valuations, but everyone in that room knew the truth. The decision was mine. I could push the acquisition forward, effectively stripping my parents of the company they sacrificed their lives for. Or I could step back, let them sink on their own, and watch from the sidelines. As I walked out of the room, my dad called after me, softly but firmly, "Think carefully, son. This isn't just business, it's family." I didn't turn around, because to me, family was exactly what they stopped being the day they fired me. After that first meeting, I couldn't stop replaying my dad's words in my head. This isn't just business, it's family. It haunted me because on some level he wasn't wrong. The business and the family had always been one and the same. My earliest memories weren't of playgrounds or summer vacations. They were of sitting in the back office coloring while my mom went over payroll, of watching my dad shake hands with suppliers like every deal was a sacred promise. My whole childhood was built inside those walls. And yet, those same walls were where they tore everything down for me. For the first time since I joined the competitor, I hesitated. My professional brain told me the truth. The acquisition was a smart move. We'd get valuable clients, assets, and market share at a fraction of the cost. My parents' mismanagement made it a bargain. Any executive in my position would recommend moving forward. But my personal brain, the part of me that still remembered family dinners, that still wanted my parents' approval even after everything, was conflicted. Was I really prepared to be the one to sign off on their downfall? That night, I went for a long walk around the city. I passed by restaurants we used to celebrate at when I was a kid. I remembered my dad raising a glass and saying, "One day, all this will be yours." At the time, I believed him. I lived for that promise. And now, years later, all this was being offered to me in the cruelest way possible. Stripped from their hands because they hadn't trusted me when it mattered. I couldn't help wondering, if they had never fired me, would any of this be happening? Or was it inevitable? The next morning, I got an email from my mom. The subject line just said, "Talk." Inside was a short message. "We don't want to lose the company. We know we made mistakes. Can we meet privately? Just you and us. No lawyers. No board." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to let them stew in the consequences of their actions. But another part, the son who still, against his better judgment, cared, couldn't resist. We met that evening in a small cafe away from the office. My mom looked brittle, like she hadn't slept in weeks. My dad seemed worn down, too. For the first time in my life, they didn't look like business titans. They looked like parents, flawed, scared, vulnerable. My mom reached across the table and said, "We should have handled things differently. We thought we were protecting the company. We didn't think you'd actually leave us behind." That last part stung. Leave them behind? They had fired me, cast me out, replaced me with Daniel, who now sat in their crumbling business pretending to be a leader. I said, "You didn't just fire me. You made a choice. And now you're living with it." My dad sighed heavily. "We know Daniel isn't you, but he's still our son. We thought maybe he'd grow into it if you weren't in his shadow." That hit me like a punch. So all those years of sacrifice, of proving myself, of carrying the business, they weren't enough. They had sabotaged me on purpose, thinking it would somehow make Daniel stronger. Instead, it broke everything. Walking out of that cafe, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. This wasn't just about money, or betrayal, or even justice. This was about the fact that my parents had never seen me for who I really was. They only saw Daniel's older brother, the dependable one, the backup plan. And now, for the first time, I held their future in my hands. But was I strong enough to do what they had done to me? Or would that make me just as ruthless as them? The closer we got to the acquisition deadline, the more the pressure built. At work, the executives were practically salivating. To them, my parents' company wasn't a bleeding wound from my past. It was an opportunity. Every day, I'd get pulled into side conversations about valuations, about how quickly we could absorb their client base, about how much market share we'd gain. One director slapped me on the back in the break room and said, "You must be loving this. Sweet revenge." Huh? Don't worry, we'll make sure you're well compensated when the deal goes through. I forced a smile, but inside I felt sick. This wasn't just about money to me. It was about everything that had been stolen, twisted, and broken. And yet, no one else in the room could understand that. At night, the guilt gnawed at me. I'd stare at the ceiling, thinking about my dad's weary voice, my mom's brittle apology, the way Daniel had scoffed in that boardroom. I thought about the employees, people I'd worked with side by side for years, who had nothing to do with this family drama but would lose their jobs if the acquisition went through. That's what made it harder. The collateral damage. If I pulled the trigger, it wouldn't just be my parents losing everything. It would be the receptionist who brought me coffee when I worked late, the warehouse guys I used to joke around with, the clients who still trusted the family name. They'd all be swept into the wreckage. But then again, hadn't those same people watched me walk out with my box that day? Some had whispered apologies. Most had stayed silent. None of them stopped my parents from throwing me aside. The conflict was eating me alive. The CEO called me into his office one morning. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I need to know where you stand. This acquisition, do we move forward or not?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say yes. Logically, it was the right choice. But emotionally, I couldn't bring myself to be the executioner. Not yet. "I need more time," I finally said. The CEO frowned. "Time is money. We can't sit on this forever. You know their business is circling the drain. If we don't make a move, someone else will. And frankly, I'd rather it be us. I nodded, but inside, the turmoil grew. That weekend, I got another message. This time from Daniel. It was short and bitter. Don't think for a second you're gonna swoop in here and play savior. You've always been jealous. Stay out of this. Jealous. That word almost made me laugh out loud. What exactly was there to be jealous of? A failing company? Parents who never believed in me? A brother who coasted his whole life and still somehow managed to feel entitled? But the message lit a fire in me. Daniel wasn't just useless. He was arrogant enough to think I had no right to be involved. And that made me wonder. Maybe letting the company collapse wasn't revenge. Maybe it was justice. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging thought. If I did this, would I finally feel free? Or would I carry the guilt forever? The deadline was approaching. The company was looking to me for the final word. My parents were begging for mercy. Daniel was daring me to make a move. And me? I was stuck in the middle, wondering whether doing the smart thing also meant becoming the very thing I hated. When my parents asked for another private meeting, I almost said no. I already knew how it would go. Apologies laced with excuses, pleas for help that felt more like demands. But something in me wanted to see it through, maybe because deep down, I needed them to finally recognize reality. We met in the same cafe as before. This time, Daniel was there too, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. He had that smug smirk plastered across his face, the one that always made me want to punch a wall. My mom opened first. We're running out of options. The bank's breathing down our neck. Suppliers are pulling out. If the acquisition doesn't happen, we're finished. Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the mother who used to tuck me in at night, not the ruthless manager who had fired me. My dad leaned forward, his tone quieter. We know we made mistakes, but this company, it's our life's work. It's also yours, whether you want to admit it or not. You grew up in it. You helped build it. Please don't let it die. I stared at them, letting their words hang in the air. Then Daniel cut in. You're not seriously considering selling us out, are you? He sneered. You think you're some big shot now just because you got lucky at a competitor? Newsflash. This company isn't yours. It never was. You were just an employee. Disposable. That's why they let you go. The words hit like knives, not because they were true, but because they echoed the exact justification my parents had used years ago. And here Daniel was, parroting it back to me, as if firing me had been some brilliant strategic move instead of the beginning of their downfall. I turned to him slowly. You're right about one thing, Daniel. I was disposable to you. But guess what? I'm not disposable anymore. In fact, I'm the one holding the cards now. And whether you like it or not, your future and theirs depends on me. The smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. My mom tried to smooth things over. Don't let your brother get under your skin. He's frustrated. But we're family. Surely we can find a solution that helps everyone. I leaned back, finally saying what I'd been holding in for years. You keep using that word, family. But when you fired me, was that family? When you chose Daniel over me, was that family? You taught me something important that day. In this world, loyalty only matters until it's inconvenient. Well, now you're the ones who are inconvenient. The silence after that was heavy. My dad rubbed his forehead like he was carrying the weight of 10 lifetimes. My mom's lips trembled, but she didn't argue. And Daniel just sat there, glaring at me, his jaw tight, as if he couldn't process the idea that I had power he couldn't touch. I stood up. The decision isn't made yet. But make no mistake, you're not negotiating from strength. You're begging. And I haven't decided whether I'm in a merciful mood. As I walked out, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt conflicted. Part of me savored the shift in power, finally being the one in control. But another part of me, quieter, more dangerous, wondered if I was crossing a line I couldn't come back from. For years, I had wanted them to admit they were wrong. Now they were on their knees. But instead of feeling satisfied, all I felt was the crushing weight of choice. A week after that tense cafe meeting, I got an email from my mom with the subject line, "Proposal." I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a PDF drafted like an official business agreement and a short message. "We want you back. Let's talk." Back? First, I laughed out loud. They had fired me when I was their most valuable asset. And now, after years of pretending I didn't exist, they suddenly wanted me to return? The irony was suffocating. But then I opened the PDF, and the laughter stopped. They weren't just offering me a job. They were offering me a position as co-CEO. Equal authority with my dad. Full operational control. A guaranteed stake in ownership. And this was the kicker, a clause that would effectively sideline Daniel from any real decision-making. It was everything I had once dreamed of. The recognition, the authority, the chance to finally shape the business the way I always believed it could be run. Years ago, I would have killed for this offer. But now, felt like a desperate bribe. That evening, we met again. This time in their office, the same building where they had once called me in just to fire me. Walking through those halls again was surreal, memories hitting me from every corner. The late nights, the arguments, the sense of purpose I once felt here. And, of course, the humiliation of that day when they decided I was too expensive to keep. My mom slid the contract across the table. "We should never have let you go," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You've proven yourself. We need you now. This isn't just about saving us. It's about rebuilding together." My dad nodded. "We're not asking you to forget the past, but this is our way of making it right. You'd have full control of operations. Real authority. A chance to lead the company into the future." Then Daniel, arms crossed, scoffed. "So what, you're just gonna hand him the keys after all this time? He abandoned us. He's working for the competition. And now you want to put him above me?" My mom shot him a glare. "Daniel, you've had years to prove yourself. The numbers speak for themselves. This isn't about favoritism, it's about survival." Hearing her say that should have felt validating. For years, I wanted her to finally admit Daniel wasn't capable. But instead of pride, I felt something colder. Bitterness. Because she wasn't admitting it out of honesty. She was admitting it out of desperation. I leaned back in my chair, studying them. "Why now? Why offer me this after all these years?" My dad answered simply, "Because without you, we don't have a future." The words hung in the air. On paper, this was the perfect chance at redemption for them and for me. But in reality, it felt like a trap. If I accepted, I'd be bailing them out, saving them from the consequences of their own arrogance. If I refused, I'd be the executioner, letting my family's life's work die. I didn't give them an answer that night. I took the contract and walked out, my hands shaking. Back at my apartment, I laid it on the table and just stared at it. The weight of it felt heavier than any paper should. This was more than a contract, it was the power to rewrite history. But the question gnawed at me, was this really about fixing the past? Or was it just another way for them to control me? After leaving their office with the contract in my bag, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I needed perspective, but every person I considered asking seemed to have a completely different opinion on what I should do. I started with my closest colleague at the competitor. We'd worked together for years, building the company from a shaky start into something stable. When I told him the situation, he didn't hesitate. "Are you kidding me?" he said. "They fired you, Kat. They let Daniel coast for years while they let you go. Now they're begging? Forget it. You have the power. If you save them, you're just giving them a free pass. Walk away. Let them sink." It was blunt, but I couldn't deny the truth in it. They had abandoned me when it mattered. Why should I rescue them now? Then I called an old friend from college, someone who had known my family and me for years. Her perspective was completely different. "You're overthinking it," she said. "This is your family. Yes, they hurt you, but this isn't just about revenge. If you take this position, you can rebuild things, create a proper company culture, and maybe even fix what Daniel and your parents ruined. You can make it right, not just for you, but for everyone who depends on them." Her words echoed a painful truth. Some innocent people, employees, clients, even Daniel to a small degree, could suffer if I didn't step in. Walking away might feel satisfying, but it could also destroy more than just my parents' pride. I spent the next few days oscillating between anger and guilt. Every time I pictured their office burning down metaphorically, or worse, actually going bankrupt, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. But then I'd think about the receptionist who always stayed late to finish tasks, or the warehouse staff who had no say in any of this, and my chest tightened. The conflict wasn't just about revenge versus loyalty anymore. It was about morality. Could I, after everything they had done, forgive them enough to save them? Could I wield my power without letting it turn into cruelty? Even Daniel's messages kept coming. Angry, bitter, defensive. Don't try to play hero. You'll ruin everything if you step back in. We don't need you. And yet, that pushy arrogance, that refusal to acknowledge reality, only reminded me of why they were in this position to begin with. Daniel hadn't changed. My parents hadn't truly learned from their mistakes. I found myself alone late one night, staring at the contract, the words blurring in front of my eyes. For the first time, I felt the full weight of my decision. Whatever choice I made would not only define the company, it would define me. Would I be the daughter who finally saved her parents, forgiving the betrayal and rebuilding a broken family legacy? Or would I be the one who let them fall, letting justice, some cold karmic justice, take its course? Neither option felt easy, neither felt fully right, and yet, deep down, I knew that whatever I chose, there was no going back. The deadline loomed closer. The board was waiting. My parents were waiting. Daniel was watching. And I had to decide, mercy or retribution. The morning of the final board meeting, I woke up with a tight knot in my chest. The contract still lay on my desk, untouched. For years, I had fantasized about this moment, the chance to finally be in control, to decide the fate of the company that had shaped and betrayed me. And now, reality hit harder than any dream ever could. I dressed carefully, each piece of clothing a shield against the storm I knew awaited me. Walking into the office, I saw my parents already there, tense, clutching files and spreadsheets like life rafts. Daniel sat in the corner, arms crossed, smirk replaced by impatience and thinly veiled fear. The board convened. My CEO glanced at me, silently asking, "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath and began to speak. I laid out my evaluation, the mismanagement, the financial risks, the operational gaps. I acknowledged my parents' past efforts, the years they had poured into building the company, and the passion that had once made it successful. I also made it clear that Daniel's leadership was inadequate for the challenges ahead. Then I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Everyone in the room felt it. This wasn't just business anymore. Finally, I looked at my parents. "I've thought long and hard about this," I said. "I know what this company meant to you, and what it could mean for all of us if it survives. But it's not just yours to save anymore. It's mine too, because I know how to run it. And I will not put myself in a position to be sidelined again." My mom's eyes welled up. My dad's hand trembled slightly as he clutched his papers. Daniel's face turned red, jaw tight. "I've decided," I continued, "that the acquisition will move forward, but under my leadership. The company will be integrated into our competitor, where I now lead operations. This is the only way it can survive. Unfortunately, that means the old leadership structure will be dissolved." The silence in the room was deafening. My parents opened their mouths and then closed them again. Daniel tried to protest, but the board's attention was firmly on me. When the CEO nodded, approving the final terms, a strange calm washed over me. It was done. I had the power. I had the control. I had fulfilled my own vision for the company and for myself. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. There was no joy in seeing my parents humbled, no satisfaction in watching them lose the empire they had built. There was only relief that I had preserved the company, that I had proven my own worth, that I was no longer expendable. The fallout was immediate. Daniel was removed from decision-making, reassigned to a nominal role, and left to stew in the realization that ambition alone wasn't enough. My parents were forced to accept that their legacy was being handed over to the child they had wronged. Employees and clients were stabilized under my leadership, and slowly, the company started to regain its footing. I returned home that night exhausted, my mind a jumble of memories, triumphs, and guilt. Had I been too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? And the question that haunted me most, AITA for refusing to save the business in the way my parents wanted. After everything they did to me? Because in the end, I saved the company. But not the way they expected. And as I stared at the ceiling, I realized that sometimes justice isn't mercy, and mercy isn't justice. And the line between them is a weight only you can bear.